Listen to me carefully, because what I am about to say is not for tomorrow. It is not for next week, and it is not for someday in the distant future. God said this will happen in your house tonight, and if you have ears to hear, your spirit will recognize that something has already begun to shift. This is not a message you casually hear while distracted. This is not a word you listen to while your mind is wandering, because when God speaks about tonight, He is declaring immediacy, urgency, and divine interruption. Tonight means before the sun rises again. Tonight means before fear has another chance to speak. Tonight means before despair tightens its grip one more time. Tonight means that what has resisted you for years has reached the end of its permission. There are moments when God speaks softly, and there are moments when God speaks with force. And tonight is not gentle. Tonight is decisive. Tonight is confrontational. Tonight is the night when God steps into the atmosphere of your house and says, I will no longer be silent while my child lives beneath what I have already authorized. You have cried in that house. You have worried in that house. You have replayed conversations in that house and imagined worst-case scenarios in that house. But God said tonight, that same house will hear a different sound. The sound of authority being restored, the sound of peace taking its rightful place, the sound of fear being evicted without negotiation. You must understand something about God. When God declares a moment, it is not a suggestion, it is not poetry, and it is not emotional comfort. It is law. Heaven does not experiment, heaven enforces. And when God says something will happen in your house tonight, it means the spiritual environment you have been living under is about to be challenged by divine order. Some of you have normalized tension. You have normalized heaviness. You have normalized lack. You have normalized conflict. But God never intended you to adapt to what He already decided to remove. Tonight is not about what you deserve. Tonight is about what God has decided. Tonight is not about your perfection. Tonight is about His authority. Tonight is not about your strength. Tonight is about His power entering places where you felt powerless. There are rooms in your house that have absorbed years of anxiety, and God says tonight those rooms will be reclaimed. There are conversations that never happened because fear silenced you, and God says tonight boldness will rise. There are decisions you postponed because you were waiting for certainty, and God says tonight clarity will come. Do not underestimate what happens when God enters a space you thought was ordinary. You see walls and furniture, God sees territory. You see routines, God sees patterns that must be broken. You see another night, God sees an appointed hour, and when God appoints an hour, resistance becomes irrelevant. The problem was never that God lacked power. The problem was timing, alignment, and expectation. And now God says the alignment is complete. Some of you are listening right now with skepticism in your mind and hunger in your spirit. Your mind is saying, I have heard words like this before. But your spirit is responding because it recognizes the weight of divine intention. You are not responding emotionally. You are responding spiritually. God does not awaken hunger unless provision is near. God does not stir expectation unless fulfillment is in motion. God does not announce tonight unless heaven is already prepared. Understand this deeply. Your house is more than a physical structure. It is a spiritual environment shaped by words, beliefs, fears, and expectations. And for too long, certain thoughts have been allowed to live there rent-free. Thoughts of failure, thoughts of limitation, thoughts of inevitability. But God says tonight, eviction notices are being served. You may not hear a noise with your ears, but you will feel a shift in your spirit. The heaviness that follows you from room to room will lose its authority. The tension that greets you at the door will not recognize the atmosphere anymore. God is not entering your house to negotiate with fear. God does not negotiate with fear. God replaces it. God is not entering your house to coexist with confusion. God eliminates confusion. God is not entering your house to observe your struggle. God enters to end it. And when God ends something, it does not resurrect quietly. Tonight, God is restoring order, and order does not mean perfection. Order means alignment with divine intent. Order means your mind comes back under truth. Order means your emotions stop ruling your decisions. Order means your words regain power. Some of you lost confidence in your own voice because nothing seemed to change when you spoke. But God says tonight, your words will carry weight again, because fear will no longer intercept them. There are people under the sound of this message who have been surviving instead of living, enduring instead of building, coping instead of advancing. And God says tonight, survival mode ends. You cannot build a future while bracing for impact every day. God never designed you to live defensively. God designed you to live decisively. And tonight, decisiveness will return. Do not mistake this moment as emotional excitement. This is not adrenaline. This is not atmosphere. This is not persuasion. This is recognition. Your spirit recognizes that God is serious about your house. God is serious about what happens where you sleep, where you eat, where you think, where you speak, where you dream. Because if God changes your house, He changes your tomorrow. Some of you have prayed for years asking God to change external circumstances. But God waited because He wanted to change the internal environment first. Because if He blesses a house still ruled by fear, the blessing becomes another source of anxiety. But tonight, God says, the foundation is ready. The internal resistance has weakened. The walls are prepared. And what God releases tonight will not be wasted. I need you to understand something crucial. When God says tonight, He is saying that delay has expired. Delay was no. Denial. Delay was preparation. Delay was alignment. Delay was strengthening. But now delay has lost its authority. You are not late. You are not behind. You are on time for what God has decided to do next. Tonight, clarity will replace confusion. You will not suddenly know everything, but you will know enough to move forward without fear. Tonight, courage will rise not as loud confidence, but as quiet certainty. Tonight, peace will enter not as a temporary feeling, but as a governing force. Tonight, the voice that has been whispering doubt will be silenced by truth that feels undeniable. Some of you will lie down tonight and realize your mind is quiet for the first time in years. No racing thoughts, no rehearsing failures, no imagining loss. And you will wonder why. And the answer is that God has taken His place as ruler over your thoughts again. Some of you will wake up tomorrow with ideas you did not have yesterday, because God restores creativity when fear leaves. Some of you will feel strength in your body because God removes burdens that manifested physically. Do not look for fireworks, look for authority. God does not always announce Himself with noise. Sometimes God announces Himself with peace, so deep it feels unfamiliar. Sometimes God announces Himself by removing the urge to panic. Sometimes God announces Himself by making you unbothered by what used to control you. Tonight, God is not fixing a symptom. God is addressing the root. God is not managing a crisis. D is establishing dominion. God is not responding to fear. God is replacing it with truth that stands even when circumstances have not fully changed yet. You must hear this clearly. What God begins tonight will continue unfolding. Tonight is the seed. Tonight is the spark. Tonight is the turning point. And once a turning point happens, nothing continues the same way again. Your house has heard enough crying. Your house has absorbed enough stress. Your house has hosted enough fear. And God says tonight, joy will begin to reclaim territory. Peace will take its rightful seat. And strength will stand where weakness once lived. This is not because you earned it. This is not because you figured everything out. This is because God is faithful to His own word. And when God decides to act, He does not wait for perfect conditions. He creates them. Right now, as you are listening, something is already happening, not later, not after you finish listening, now. God is already rearranging what you thought was fixed. God is already loosening what felt permanent. God is already speaking to parts of you that forgot how to hope. And tonight, when you step into your house, you may not see immediate evidence with your eyes, but your spirit will recognize that something is different. The air will feel lighter. The silence will feel safer. The future will feel possible again. God said this will happen in your house tonight. Say, continue. When you're ready for the next part, you are not listening to this by accident. God does not waste moments, and God does not scatter words into the air without intention. There are times when God allows a person to struggle silently, and there are times when God interrupts that silence with a declaration so strong that it rearranges the internal landscape of the soul. Tonight is such a time. God is not merely offering encouragement, God is reclaiming authority. What you are sensing right now is not emotion, it is recognition. Something within you knows that this moment carries weight. Because God is not speaking hypothetically. God is speaking decisively. There are seasons when God allows pressure to build because pressure reveals what truly governs your life. Under pressure, false confidence collapses. Under pressure, borrowed strength disappears. Under pressure, distractions lose their appeal. And under pressure, the voice of God becomes clearer. You have been under pressure not to break you, but to strip away what could not survive the next level. Tonight, God says the stripping is complete. The excess has been removed. The false supports have fallen. And what remains is ready to receive what God is about to release. You must understand that God is not intimidated by the complexity of your situation. What overwhelms you does not impress God. What confuses you does not confuse God. God sees the end from the beginning, and when God declares a change, it is because the outcome has already been settled in the unseen realm. Tonight is not about wishful thinking. Tonight is about alignment with a decision that has already been made. Some of you have been asking God for a sign, but God says the sign is the word you are hearing right now. Faith does not always come with spectacle. Sometimes faith arrives as certainty that cannot be argued away. Sometimes faith is the quiet knowing that something has shifted even before evidence appears. And that knowing is rising in you right now. Your house has been a battleground for thoughts that did not originate with God. Thoughts that told you to lower your expectations. Thoughts that told you to settle for survival. Thoughts that told you that disappointment was inevitable. But God says tonight, those thoughts lose their authority. They may attempt to speak, but they will no longer sound convincing. Their influence is broken not by force, but by truth. God is not interested in temporary relief. God is interested in permanent transformation. Relief calms the moment, transformation changes direction. And tonight, direction is changing. The trajectory of your life is being adjusted. The angle of your future is shifting. What once felt like a slow decline is being interrupted by divine recalibration. You have underestimated how deeply God is involved in the details of your life. You thought God was concerned only with large outcomes, but God is attentive to atmospheres, to rhythms, to patterns, to what happens when no one else is watching. God has seen the nights when you sat in silence because you were too tired to pray. God has seen the mornings when you woke up already exhausted by the thought of the day ahead. God has seen the internal negotiations you made just to keep going. And God says tonight, I have seen enough. Tonight, God is restoring dignity to your inner world. Dignity is not pride. Dignity is alignment with truth. It is knowing your value without needing validation. It is standing firm without aggression. It is moving forward without apology. And when dignity returns, fear loses its leverage. Some of you have lived in reaction mode for so long that you forgot what it feels like to live intentionally. Every decision was shaped by what might go wrong. Every plan was limited by what you feared losing. But God says tonight, reaction ends and intention begins. You will no longer be driven by avoidance. You will be guided by purpose. God is not asking you to deny reality. God is asking you to see reality through truth instead of fear. Fear magnifies obstacles. Truth reveals pathways. Fear asks, what if it fails? Truth asks, what if it works? And tonight, truth is taking precedence. There are generational patterns that have lingered in your house. Patterns you did not choose, but learn to live with. Patterns of scarcity, patterns of silence, patterns of emotional distance, patterns of resignation. But God says tonight, what was inherited will not define what is continued. You are not bound to repeat what you did not create. Tonight marks a break in continuity. God does not simply remove negative patterns. God replaces them with life-giving ones. Where there was silence, God brings communication. Where there was tension, God brings understanding. Where there was hopelessness, God brings vision. And these changes do not announce themselves loudly. They establish themselves quietly, steadily, and permanently. You may not realize it yet, but tonight you will begin to respond differently to familiar situations. The same trigger will no longer produce the same reaction. The same challenge will not provoke the same anxiety. The same uncertainty will not paralyze you as it once did. And this is how you will know that God has moved. Your responses will change before your circumstances fully do. God is teaching you to trust stability over urgency. Urgency is the language of fear. Stability is the language of authority. Fear rushes. Authority stands. Fear demands immediate resolution. Authority allows process without panic. And tonight, God is transitioning you from urgency to stability. Some of you have been waiting for our external permission to believe again. You were waiting for circumstances to improve before allowing yourself to hope. But God says tonight, hope will rise independent of conditions. Hope will not wait for permission. Hope will take its place because God has authorized it. Your house will no longer be a place where you merely recover from the world. Your house will become a place where you are strengthened to face it. Rest will return. Laughter will return. Creativity will return. Not because everything outside has changed, but because everything inside has been reordered. God is not rushing this process, but God is not delaying it either. There is a difference between haste and momentum. Haste is driven by anxiety. Momentum is sustained by purpose. Tonight, momentum begins. You will feel it not as pressure, but as pull. A pull toward growth, a pull toward clarity, a pull toward action that feels aligned rather than forced. There are words you have spoken over yourself in moments of frustration that did not align with truth. Words of limitation, words of self-judgment, words of surrender to mediocrity. But God says tonight, those words are being overridden. They will not define your future. The authority of truth is greater than the weight of careless speech. God is restoring your ability to envision without fear. Vision had become dangerous because disappointment followed expectation. So you learn to keep your hopes small. But God says tonight, expand your vision again. And not recklessly, but faithfully. Not impulsively, but confidently. You will notice that tonight, when you think about the future, it will not feel as heavy. It may still be unknown, but it will not feel threatening. And that shift is significant. That shift marks the return of trust. God is not asking you to ignore pain. God is healing it. God is not dismissing your questions. God is answering them through peace that surpasses logic. God is not minimizing your struggle. God is concluding it. Tonight, your house becomes a place of alignment. Alignment between thought and truth. Alignment between desire and purpose. Alignment between action and direction. And when alignment happens, progress becomes natural. You are stepping into a phase where effort will feel different, not easier, but effective, not effortless, but meaningful. You will no longer expend energy fighting internal resistance. Your strength will be directed outward, toward building, toward creating, toward advancing. God is doing something profound, and profound things do not always feel dramatic. Sometimes they feel like relief. Sometimes they feel like clarity. Sometimes they feel like the quiet confidence that says, I can do this. Tonight, that confidence is returning. Not arrogance, not presumption. Confidence rooted in truth. Confidence anchored in the understanding that God does not begin what God does not intend to complete. And as this night unfolds, you will realize that what God promised is no. Abstract. It is personal. It is specific. It is intentional. And it is already in motion. God said this will happen in your house tonight. Listen to me with the deepest part of your spirit, because God is not speaking lightly. This is not a motivational suggestion. This is a divine declaration. Tonight, what God is doing in your house is not accidental. It is orchestrated. God is moving with precision. God is acting with authority. God is not experimenting. What begins tonight has already been decided in the unseen. Some of you are still doubting the magnitude of what is about to take place, but God does not speak empty words. Every syllable of this declaration carries weight in heaven and will manifest in your house with power. You may not see the immediate manifestation with your eyes yet, but the spiritual architecture of your home, your relationships, your thoughts, and your emotions are already being aligned with the divine order. There are forces that have tried to occupy space in your house for years. Some of them came disguised as unavoidable circumstances, some as inherited struggles, and some as moments of fear that whispered lies into your mind. God says tonight, all of those intruders are being evicted. God does not bargain with resistance. God does not compromise with what has no rightful authority. And when God declares, the spiritual atmosphere shifts. You may feel a weight lift off your chest as if your body itself knows that a new order has arrived. The heaviness that clung to your house, the tension that hung in the air, the silent discouragement that filled corners, all of it will be replaced with peace that speaks louder than any struggle. Some of you are concerned about timing, wondering why this change is happening now. Understand this, God's timing is perfect. Not early, not late. God's timing always matches preparation with provision. God has been working in secret to position everything so that tonight's breakthrough is not random. Your faith, your endurance, your persistence, even your prayers that felt unanswered, all of them have prepared the ground for what God is about to release. You are ready, even if you feel unready. Your house is ready, even if it seems ordinary. God has been quietly preparing your environment, removing what needed to be removed, strengthening what needed to be strengthened, so that the impact of tonight is complete and undeniable. I want you to hear this tonight. What God brings will not only resolve old problems, it will initiate new beginnings. Sometimes we pray for relief, but God is offering transformation. Relief is temporary, but transformation changes the trajectory of your life and the life of your household permanently. This is why tonight is not just about fixing a single issue. It is about restoring the entire structure. Your home, your mind, your spirit, your relationships, your vision. God is rewriting the narrative. God is reclaiming the territory that has been under oppression, confusion, fear, or limitation. And God is replacing it with a vision that is bright, clear, and unstoppable. Your house is a reflection of what is happening inside you, and God is beginning from within. Tonight, God is restoring your inner authority. Your thoughts that were once scattered, anxious, and doubtful will begin to organize around truth. Your emotions that have been unpredictable, unstable, and reactive will find their anchor in God's certainty. Your will, which has been overwhelmed by indecision and fear, will align with God's purpose. When the internal is restored, the external cannot resist it. Your family dynamics, your relationships, your work, and your environment will begin to reflect the peace and power that God has established inside you tonight. Some of you have been waiting for permission to live boldly, to pursue dreams, to take steps of faith. Tonight, God is granting that permission, not because you have earned it, but because God is faithful to act according to His own word. God is always faithful. God is always just. God is always powerful. When God says something, it is done. And tonight, the decree has gone forth over your house. A shift is occurring that will be undeniable. You will know it by the calm that replaces anxiety, the clarity that replaces confusion, the confidence that replaces fear. The power of God is entering, and resistance is powerless against it. There are those who have grown accustomed to limitation, who have learned to accept less than what God intends, who have normalized struggle as permanent. God says tonight, limitation ends, acceptance of less ends. Struggle does not have the final word. The authority of God surpasses every obstacle, every doubt, and every challenge that has appeared insurmountable. The same God who has seen your past and your present is now acting decisively to shape your future. The power that orchestrates the universe is entering your home. Nothing too small, nothing too large. God is comprehensive. God's work touches every corner, every moment, every relationship, every thought, every room. Do not underestimate the subtlety of divine movement. Sometimes God moves like a flood, breaking through visibly and powerfully. Other times God moves like a quiet wind, rearranging things imperceptibly until you notice the change in the atmosphere. Tonight, whether it is loud or quiet, know that it is undeniable. The spiritual forces that have tried to bind you, hold you back, or limit your vision are losing ground. Every barrier, every chain, every obstacle that has resisted divine order will begin to crumble. And when God moves, the movement is permanent. Nothing can reverse what God has declared. Some of you have allowed disappointment to settle into your house, to whisper lies, to manipulate your hope. God says tonight, disappointment is leaving. God is not merely masking it with temporary distraction. God is removing it entirely. What you thought would remain a permanent part of your story will now become a testimony of God's faithfulness. You may look around and still see remnants of struggle, but God is already working in ways unseen, preparing the evidence of a breakthrough that will astonish you. Tonight is also about preparation for what is coming next. God does not only deliver, God positions. God does not only remove, God establishes. God is giving you not just relief, but a foundation for the next level of blessing, influence, and authority. Your household will become a place where courage is cultivated, where vision is nurtured, where faith is strengthened. You will experience not just change, but advancement. And advancement begins with God's authority being recognized and received within your home tonight. Some of you have been living under the illusion that effort alone is sufficient. You have pushed, strained, strategized, and planned, yet the results were minimal. God says tonight, divine intervention replaces mere effort. God's power is not limited by human resources. God's wisdom is not confined by human understanding. What you have labored to achieve will now be accelerated because God has chosen to act. Tonight, the unseen will manifest. Tonight, the promise moves from potential to reality. There is a difference between hope that waits and hope that acts. Waiting without action is passive. Action without hope is futile. But God is creating an environment tonight where hope and action meet. You will feel a surge of courage. That will drive wise decisions. You will feel clarity that allows bold moves. You will feel peace that prevents panic. God is not only changing your house, God is changing the way you engage with the world. Tonight, your approach to challenges, opportunities, and relationships will never be the same again because the authority of God has taken residence in your life. Say this with me in your spirit. God has spoken. God has acted. God has entered my house tonight. The atmosphere of my home will never be the same again. The heaviness that has lingered is lifted. The limitations that bound me are broken. The doors that were closed are opening. The relationships that were strained are being restored. The peace that I have longed for is settling in. The provision that I have hoped for is arriving. The clarity that I have needed is coming. The courage I have lacked is rising. The authority I have needed is established. God is faithful, God is powerful, God is present, and God is not finished. God said this will happen in your house tonight. Listen to me, because tonight is not ordinary. Tonight is supernatural. Tonight is the moment when what has been delayed is no longer postponed. When what has been blocked is no longer restricted. When what has been resisted is no longer able to hold its ground. God has declared a shift in your house, a shift that will ripple through every area of your life. This is not dependent on human effort, clever plans, or circumstances lining up. This is dependent on God, the one who created time, space, and every force that exists. And when God acts, even the most stubborn obstacles obey. You may look at your situation and see impossibility. God looks at it and sees opportunity. God looks at your house and sees the space where His authority must be established tonight. There are things that have lingered in your home. Fears, tensions, uncertainty, doubts, resentment, confusion that have tried to take root as permanent residents. God says tonight, those intruders are leaving. They will not negotiate. They will not linger. They will be uprooted. And where they once had influence, the presence of God will establish peace, stability, and clarity. This is not symbolic. This is not metaphorical. It is literal in the spiritual realm and will manifest in the natural. You may notice it in the air you breathe, the conversations you have, the decisions you make. The power of God entering your house is tangible, undeniable, and unstoppable. Some of you have been worn down by disappointment, worn thin by setbacks, and worn out by circumstances that seemed relentless. God says tonight, the weight that is pressed down on you will lift. You will feel relief, not temporary, but deep, lasting relief. Your mind, which has raced with anxiety, will find calm. Your spirit, which has struggled with doubt, will find certainty. Your heart, which has been burdened with worry, will find peace. God is not just fixing parts of your life. God is restoring the foundation, reestablishing the order, and creating a climate in your house that invites blessing, strength, and vision. Some of you have been hoping quietly, praying softly, wondering if your voice is heard. God says tonight, your voice has been heard. Every tear you have shed, every silent struggle, every heartfelt plea has been counted. And God is responding in a way that cannot be ignored. What has been promised, what has been declared over you from the very beginning, what has been written in the unseen is now arriving. It is arriving in your house tonight. There are blessings that have been waiting on alignment. God has been orchestrating your environment, your mindset, and even the hearts of those around you to prepare for this moment. God's timing is perfect, and tonight everything is aligned. You may not yet see the full manifestation, but the spiritual shift has occurred. What God begins in the spirit always manifests in the natural. What God declares in heaven is enacted on earth. And your house, which has known struggle, limitation, and stagnation, is about to know the manifestation of divine authority. You must understand. God is not limited by what you see, by what you feel, or by what circumstances suggest. God is unlimited in power, wisdom, and authority. God is not delayed because of human weakness or imperfection. God is never late. God is never unprepared. God is never unaware. Every detail of your life, every room of your house, every relations, every challenge has been observed, weighed, and is now being acted upon. Tonight, God is not only moving, God is taking full control. Your home is more than walls and a roof. Your home is a reflection of what is happening in your spirit. Every tension, every anxiety, every unresolved issue has a spiritual footprint. God is entering those spaces tonight. God is taking charge where human effort has failed. God is bringing clarity where confusion has reigned. God is bringing provision where lack has existed. God is bringing restoration where brokenness has been allowed to linger. And when God does this, it changes everything, not just the house, but the people in it, the relationships it holds, the legacy it carries. Some of you have feared that the struggles in your household were permanent, that certain patterns could not be broken. God says tonight, patterns are broken, chains are shattered, boundaries that limited blessing are removed. What was inherited, what was conditioned, what was formed by circumstances is being replaced by what God ordains. God is establishing a new order in your house, a spiritual climate of growth, authority, and peace. Tonight, God is releasing new vision. Vision that was clouded by fear, doubt, and uncertainty is now clear. God is not only removing obstacles, but also equipping you to receive what comes next. You will see paths where you once saw walls. You will see solutions where you once saw problems. You will see potential where you once saw impossibility. And it is all because God has entered your house with authority, power, and purpose. There is a force in the universe called divine timing. It does not wait, it does not hesitate, it does not falter. When God's timing arrives, everything aligns with precision. Tonight is the appointed time. What has been prepared in the unseen is manifesting now. Your house is ready, your family is ready, your spirit is ready, and God's power is not delayed any longer. Do not underestimate the significance of tonight. The atmosphere you are in, the space you occupy, the air you breathe will carry a new energy. You will notice it in subtle ways first. Conversations that once caused tension will now be calm. Decisions that once seemed impossible will now feel clear. Burdens that once pressed heavily will now feel lighter. And then, as God's authority continues to work, more obvious manifestations will appear. Circumstances will align. Obstacles will shift. Provision will arrive, and relationships will be restored. Some of you have struggled to believe that change was possible. You have prayed for years, watched opportunities slip away, and wondered if God had forgotten. But God has not forgotten. God has been working, aligning, preparing, and tonight, what was once distant is arriving. You will feel it, you will sense it, and you will see it. The spiritual realm has already moved, and the natural realm will follow. God does not act partially. When God intervenes, the result is total. When God moves, resistance cannot withstand it. When God speaks, the declaration is final. And tonight, God has spoken over your house. Fear, limitation, confusion, and discouragement have no authority tonight. Peace, clarity, restoration, and provision have arrived. The atmosphere of your house has shifted, and there is no returning to the old order. Your faith is not based on circumstance. It is based on the word and power of God. Your confidence tonight is not built on emotion. It is built on the certainty of divine action. Your hope is not speculative. It is anchored in the truth that God has already decided. And that truth will manifest, not tomorrow, not next week, but tonight. Say this in your spirit: God has entered my house tonight. God has removed what does not belong. God has restored what was broken. God has released what was delayed. God has aligned my household with divine purpose. God has established peace, provision, clarity, and authority. And I receive it because God is faithful, God is powerful, and God is present. God said this will happen in your house tonight. Now listen carefully, because the final words I speak to you are not merely for hearing, they are for acting. Tonight, God has spoken over your house. God has moved in your life. God has released what has been delayed, and God has restored what has been broken. But this is not the time to remain passive. God's work requires your alignment. God's power invites your participation. What God has begun will flourish fully only if you take hold of it with faith, resolve, and intentional obedience to the divine will. You cannot walk in the fullness of God's promise while clinging to old doubts, old fears, or old patterns. Now is the moment to rise, to examine your life with honesty, and to allow God's authority to govern every corner of your spirit, every decision, every word, and every action. Ask yourself, where have I tolerated mediocrity when God intended excellence? Where have I allowed fear to dictate my choices when God has equipped me with strength? Where have I postponed obedience when God has already provided direction? Tonight is the night to confront those questions with courage, because God's presence has arrived to illuminate the truth within you. The same God who moves mountains, who commands the winds, who directs the stars, is now at work in your life. God is calling you to step fully into that presence, to align your thoughts with divine wisdom, your words with divine authority, and your heart with divine purpose. Do not shrink back. Do not negotiate. Do not settle for what is easy or comfortable. God has given you a mandate to live deliberately. Your purpose is not a suggestion, it is a calling. Your life is not accidental, it is ordained. Your house is not just a physical space, it is a spiritual territory entrusted to your stewardship. And if you accept this truth tonight, if you embrace God's authority in every part of your life, you will walk into a reality transformed. The chains that bound you will no longer hold. The weight that oppressed you will no longer linger. The obstacles that intimidated you will no longer intimidate. Peace, clarity, provision, strength, and joy will take residence not by chance, but by the undeniable hand of God. And so I challenge you, do not merely hear these words. Examine your life with uncompromising honesty. Let God illuminate the corners that have been hidden, the areas that have been compromised, the thoughts that have wandered from truth. Renew your purpose tonight. Declare to yourself and to the heavens that you will no longer live in compromise, fear, or limitation. Step boldly into obedience to what God has set before you. And watch as every step is empowered. Every decision is guided and every endeavor is blessed. Let your faith rise to meet God's action. Let your courage rise to meet God's calling. Let your vision rise to meet God's promise. Tonight, God has moved in your house. Tonight, God has spoken to your spirit. Tonight, God has released blessing, restoration, and authority. The question now is, will you rise to meet God's presence with everything within you? Will you allow God to shape your life fully, to govern your thoughts, to direct your steps, and to establish your purpose? This is your moment. This is your opportunity. Do not allow it to pass unnoticed, unclaimed, or unlived. Stand firm. Step forward. Walk with God with a spirit fully awake, fully aligned, fully alive. And as you do, know this: God's faithfulness will not fail. God's power will not waver. God's presence will not depart. The transformation, the breakthrough, the restoration that begins tonight is eternal in its essence. Your house, your heart, your life, and your purpose are now indelibly marked by God's authority. Receive it, embrace it, live it, and let your spirit rise in triumph, because God said this will happen, and God is faithful to fulfill. God said this will happen in your house tonight. Now